Okay, so seeing we have a quorum and being on or about 6:30 on Monday, December 6th, bring this meeting of the Easton Conservation Commission to order. Please note, consistent with the ongoing emergency order from Governor Baker to limit gatherings and maximize social distancing, this meeting is being conducted over Zoom. Attendance by board and commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. Meeting will be recorded and broadcast on ECAT, audio and video recording. All members of the public and board should take note. To join the meeting, you click on the link in the upper left-hand corner. If you're hearing this, you know that by now. If you want to make comments during the meeting, just raise your hand or put a question in the Q&A box. Any questions, I'll actually have to recognize you so that we can properly identify you for the record. And I think that's it for housekeeping. The one last thing is we're going to take a roll call for quorum notification here. So Rory Caulfell's present.
And Carol present.
Lundy present.
Mike Speedy present. Very good. So seeing that we have a quorum, we're going to proceed. We are going to do one thing here before we start. We are going to take one hearing out of order due to the limitations of the engineer on the project. So we're going to take, first up is going to be 19 Emily Lane. This is a notice of intent. This is a continued hearing for 19 Emily Lane. This is notice of intent for construction of an in-ground pool, deck, shed, driveway, and garage.
Hey guys.
Hi. So you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you stand, Mr. Diane?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you for taking us out of order. I really do appreciate the accommodation. For the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering, here tonight representing Mr. Rudy Daji for a notice of intent in 19 Emily Lane. This is our third time before you folks for Emily Lane. The first time we came in, we had a plan that created a driveway in the 50-foot buffer zone, very, very close to the resource area, and I will say that the commission was underwhelmed with that concept, for a good way to put things. So we made some revisions, we came back, and if I could share my screen, I will show you just by a reminder of where we landed. Can everybody see the plan?
Yes.
So what we did, we originally had the driveway coming through this way where my cursor is, through the 50-foot buffer zone, very close to the wetland to get back to this garage in the back. And that wasn't an ideal situation. So what we did is we revised it to come around the house this way and stay completely outside of the 50-foot buffer zones. The last time that we were here, we were back in front of you with the concept, knowing full well that we had more details to put together. But I think the general consensus was that this was a better proposal, just by way of not encroaching in the 50-foot buffer zone, not requiring the waivers that go with that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've done since then is taken to addressing a lot of the comments made by the agent and by the commission members. We've adjusted the location of the proposed garage to provide a minimum clearance of at least 8 feet between the garage and the 50-foot buffer zone. That allows us to maneuver heavy equipment around the garage, the tracks being about 8 feet wide, without having to encroach upon the 50-foot buffer zone to install the foundation. We sent the survey crew out. We relocated all the wetland flags that you see in this vicinity through here in the area of work, just to confirm that their locations were correct. And we found them to be generally correct within a couple of feet in either direction, but we've updated those locations on the plan. We performed a test pit in this location shown here to support the design of a rooftop infiltration system for the proposed garage. We have also designed that rooftop infiltration system, and it was originally proposed underneath the gravel driveway. We moved it off to the side of the garage here underneath the proposed stockpile area so that it wouldn't have to accommodate H20 loading and things like that. We've also provided the appropriate detail for that system. We have made the determination that the pool is going to be a pervious patio, a pervious paver patio system. So we can get some groundwater recharge right through the pool itself, and we provided some details on that. We've updated our sediment control detail to reflect the new town of Easton standard. We provided a detail for the modular block retaining wall that's proposed here, noting that that wall is less than 4 feet. So the final design of that wall would be subject to a building permit and would be designed by a structural engineer. So if need be, we could certainly condition that we would provide that design prior to installation. We provided the FEMA firm panel number and the LOMA that was approved for the property. They took this portion here and defined the Zone A floodplain boundary. We've also provided an operations and maintenance plan for the proposed infiltration system in this location and for the pervious paver patio system that gives the owners guidance on how to maintain this so it works in the long term. We've also provided some, not listed in the letter that we provided, but there is a note on the plan relative to utilities that came from some discussion between Ms. Carlino and myself, that any utilities that need to be installed to access this garage, whether it be gas or electric, need to be installed within the approved limits of work. So it would generally be installed either come off the existing house through the patio, or it would go underneath the driveway, but in no case are we extending beyond what we're showing for the limits of work here without another authorization from the commission. The letter that we provided also does summarize anticipated stormwater impacts, and the takeaway from that is that anything that we propose, it could have an impervious aspect to it, whether it be the driveway, the garage, or the pool. We found some way to mitigate that. The driveway is going to be constructed of 2 kind of cobblestone pathways that are going to approximate the treads of the car tracks. The area in front of the garage where there will be some maneuvering is going to be gravel, so we can be as pervious as we can be through the garage, through the driveway. I mean, the garage is proposed with a rooftop infiltration system, and the proposed patio system is going to be pervious as well. So anything we can do to mitigate stormwater runoff, I feel we've done. So I feel that we've met the intention of the stormwater standards to the maximum extent practicable. And then lastly, we were asked to take a look at the performance standards for work in the outer 50 and the burden of proof. We did summarize, add some narrative to that, but in short, the performance standards for the outer 50 are the work in the outer 50 won't impact the resource area or the inner 50. By means of making things as pervious as we can, and moving the garage and the limit of work as far away from the 50-foot buffer zone as we can, I feel that we've accomplished the performance standards and the burden of proof that goes with that. Beyond that, we have a fairly clean, I think, staff report from your agent. Certainly, I'll let Ms. Carlino speak for herself, however. I think we've addressed everything that the commission threw at us, so I hope that we're in reasonably good shape here.
Okay. Jennifer, you want to give us a summary?
Sure, yeah. He's addressed everything that we had requested and provided the revised plans. Work is no longer within the inner 50 feet, so they don't need waivers anymore. We can add the condition that the structural engineer provide the plans before they actually start the retaining wall. And then I would just add maybe putting filter fabric layer in between the stone and the retaining wall, just to make sure there's no bleed through before or after construction.
So I think that I think you've addressed most of the questions that I have. I think that the stormwater is likely addressed here. Is there details on the plan specifically about the construction of the gravel driveway, how much substructure there is, and how much of crushed snow on top there is to be, and all that other stuff? Is that detail in the plans?
No, actually, there is not a detail for the driveway itself. There is a detail here that shows the general layout of the driveway. That it'll have the cobblestones over the vehicular tire paths, and that there will be grass in between. We can certainly add a cross-sectional detail that will show depths of aggregate for both here and the gravel area in front of the driveway. Won't be a problem.
Okay. What would you normally propose in that situation?
I'd say 8 inches of gravel underneath the base of the way. 8 inches of crushed gravel, processed gravel, to provide a solid structural base so that it doesn't rut when we drive over it.
I think that the other question, do we know, so most of the area, can you go back to the main plan where you show the garage?
Sure.
Maybe give me a little bit, blow it up for me a little bit in detail, so.
How's that?
Yeah, so most of the construction of the garage, in fact, all of it is what is currently wooded area, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So do we know exactly how many square feet of wooded area is being lost from this development, this project?
Let me take a look. We do give a breakdown in the 0 to 50. It looks like the chain, if you go to the table here, let me just go over, I'll bring it up on the screen. If you can see this wooded area here, so between the 50 and 100 foot buffer zone, wooded area, the existing is 27 and change, the proposed area will be 21 and change. So we have a differential of minus almost 6,500 square feet of wooded area as a result of the proposed disturbances.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. So I think that, so before I ask the questions, I'll propose opening the floor to other members here. So anybody have any questions?
Sure, I do.
Hi, Carol.
Yes, thank you. So to follow on, Mr. Chair, from your point about the loss of habitat area, that 6450 square feet of woods, Mr. Diaz, that's habitat. That's trees, that's native soils, that's a layer likely of some organic matter, natural organic matter on top of that. All of that is habitat, and pretty much wherever there's good habitat, there are animals, there's wildlife. And so I'd like to see your evidence, given that the entire buffer zone, not just the inner 50 feet, what's your evidence that there's no adverse effect upon wildlife or wildlife habitat when you're removing 6,450 feet of woods?
So one of the things, just to sort of clarify what's being requested here, is that wildlife and wildlife habitat are considered wetland resources under the local town bylaw. So, and I think that you've addressed the other wetland resources here and what impacts there might be on those. But I think that the wildlife habitat may be something that we need to address here. So that's the question that's being asked.
Well, I think what I would state is off the bat, this is a reasonably big piece of property, all things considered, and I don't think I actually do have the total right here. It's 170,000 square feet, so it's a little better than 4 acres.
4 acres, right? Yeah.
Right. If you look, and I don't have the figure for exactly how much of that is in buffer zone, but if you look here, this orange line where my cursor is denotes the outer 100-foot buffer zone. So just about everything, aside from this little sliver of this site, is buffer zone or resource area, right? Or otherwise habitat. I don't have that exact figure off the top of my head, but I think if we compare that to the 6450 of woods that we're removing, we're gonna find that we're removing a very small percentage of habitat. Within the outer 50-foot buffer zone, where we're allowed to work without a waiver for that work, I think there's a practical argument to be made that we're not, we're leaving plenty of habitat behind, so to speak, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make a rough calculation to give us a percent.
Yeah.
I mean, if we say that, let's say that 50,000, let's just use 50,000 square feet as a previously disturbed area, right? So let's just use that as a number. I'm just using it to get us to a number, right?
Yep, that's fair.
So I'm not asking us to calculate. I'm just getting this in the ballpark, right?
Mhm.
So that would leave us with 120,000 square feet. So that's a 5.4% area. So it's much less than 10% for sure. So I think that there's some reasonableness standard there that would, allow us to draw some conclusion that the impact to habitat, while not zero, is minimal. So from that standpoint, just from using rough numbers standpoint. So.
Yeah, and I would concur with that. I think those rough numbers are fair. Certainly, if we needed to, we could zero in on them a little bit more, but I don't think we're too far off the mark there.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably 1 point one way or the other. I don't think you'd get very much further off, even if it's 2 points. It's still,
Still well under 10.
Yeah. Okay, Carol, any other questions?
Sure, thank you. So, I don't personally like going down the path of, this is the percent or this is the area of the habitat that will be removed. What the regulations say is there shall be no adverse effects upon any of the bylaw wetland values. And what does no mean? Does no mean anything but zero? And so let me ask you this, imagine your neighborhood. What if, just take it from the animal experience to the human experience, what happens if a bulldozer shows up in your neighborhood one day and takes out 5% of your neighborhood? The people living in those houses, what happens to them? How do animals not get to continue to live in their homes? How is removing habitat from a resource area, which has a presumption of significance, not an adverse effect? We're not talking about wildlife population. We don't have a performance standard to that level, but we do have a requirement of a burden of proof that shows at least a preponderance of evidence. And the commission, in the form of the NACC Wetlands Buffer Zone Guidebook, clearly says that 50 feet is not enough for any wildlife.
So just to clarify on one thing here, that the performance standard on the outer 50 is activities within the outer 50 feet of a buffer zone shall not adversely affect the form or function of the adjacent bylaw resource area or the inner 50 no disturbance zone of the buffer zone. It does not say no, just no effect. It says adversely affect.
I agree with you, and that's the performance standard. However, the applicant must meet the burden of proof, which outside of the inner 50 feet, I think, is a preponderance of evidence. Unlike in a waiver situation, it's evidence that is without doubt or uncertainty.
Right. So I think I just want to be very clear that it isn't. I don't consider it to be zero as the only answer here. I think that there isn't discretion involved in here as whether or not it's adversely impacting the outer 50 in the resource area. So I want to be clear that I think you have a position. I think there's an alternate position that allows others to have a position that says I can reasonably come to a conclusion that less than 6% of the area is being impacted, and that it will not adversely impact the overall wildlife wildlife habitat there. So I think it's reasonable for someone to be able to draw that conclusion. I don't know if I've drawn that yet. I just want to have a discussion about what the regulations actually say versus your position on what they should say or should be, how they should be interpreted.
Hold on, Mr. Chair. The regulations say 5033, permit for work.
Okay, just one second, Carol. Just one second, Carol.
You have to do both. If
Carol,
it can't be the
Carol.
performance standard, they get a waiver or request a
Carol.
waiver.
First of all, address me with some respect. Okay, hold on, Mr. Chair. That's really not how this goes. I've had a reasonable, conversation here about what it says and what it doesn't say. Okay, so I would ask that you address me and any other member here with respect. Okay, and if we have to go to wait until you're recognized, we'll go that route. I really don't go that route, but I prefer to have a conversation about it. You have the floor. I'll give it to you to have your discussion about what you believe the regulations say. I just want to be clear what the regulations do say as opposed to how they're being interpreted.
May I speak?
Yep, I already gave you the floor.
All right, thank you. So if we could maybe both look at 5033. Now, you and I agree on the performance standards, but what you don't seem to be seeing from a regulatory point of view is 5033B1, which, as I've been saying, it requires a meeting of the burden of proof and the meeting of the performance standards.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, with regard to the burden of proof, I think to suggest that a net zero impact leads down a road that says that there can never be alteration within the buffer zone, right? Because if the threshold is always going to be a net zero impact, any disturbance within the buffer zone will take you above that threshold, which I think is why we look at trying to keep these things under a reasonable number like 10%, because then it allows for there to be human performance as well as environmental performance within that buffer zone at the same time. I just fear that we go down a bad path when we start to look at absolute zero as the threshold.
Okay, so noted. Anybody else have any other comments? Anybody have any questions for Mr. Diaz?
If Roy, I should probably just note that I have to recuse myself on this project.
Okay. So from my perspective, I do think that there is oh, Mike, did you have something to say?
No,
Sorry, I
you're
didn't
good.
notice you came up. Okay.
No, you're good. I was thinking, but you're good.
So I think that from the standard that to read the full context of it, it is the proposed work and its natural and consequential cumulative impacts and effects. Okay, so it's not just that there's no adverse effect, it's that the consequential cumulative impacts. So I think that there's some discretion there to determine whether or not we believe that the impacts are consequential and cumulative and whether or not they're having adverse impacts. So that's my read of it. I also believe that if our determination is some zero impact, we could have easily written the regulations in about 3 paragraphs. Because I don't believe we have the discretion to make those choices about whether or not we believe that the work being done is impacting the buffer zones and the wildlife or the wetland resources, which includes wildlife. So I'm going to raise the issue about wildlife impact. do believe that we have the discretion to do so, and determine whether or not we believe that the consequential cumulative impacts will have an adverse impact. So, any other questions? Carol?
Thank you. So I appreciate you saying that, and I believe that the reason we're here is to protect the public's interest, and the public, the state and the town bylaw require us not to go by our beliefs, but by evidence. So I still don't see how the applicant has met the burden of proof.
Okay.
I don't see the evidence. There's no evidence. How are we supposed to give a permit when we're not having applicants give us evidence about wildlife and wildlife habitat? That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Well,
Like, we just can't make crap up about what we think science says.
Carol, I'm going to ask that you really keep this as professional as you possibly can. We're in a public hearing here. Okay. First of all, I don't believe that Mr. Diaz has made anything up in relation to this project and the presentation of the information. If you need additional information, you can request it of the applicant. We can deliberate on that and determine whether or not we want the applicant to present that forward. Maybe there's some additional information that would bring you closer to some acceptance or not, or to be able to come to some conclusion that the cumulative or consequential impacts here will not have an adverse impact. I believe that we've had enough of these projects to sort of understand what 6,500 square feet of disturbance, what kind of impact will have over 100,000 square feet of wetland resources in this area. So, from my perspective, if there's something specific, other than, I think it has to be within reason of what the applicant project and the scale of the project is. So,
May I speak?
if you're requesting to make a comment, yes.
Yes, thank you. So, a hearing or two ago, Mr. Diaz, we were talking about slope. And we were looking at the MACC guidebook about the slope was a certain percent, which meant that there had to be a slope adjustment in order for the buffer zone to do its job. Do you recall that?
Yes, it was with regard to the driveway, when the driveway was located adjacent on the opposite side within the 50-foot buffer zone, much closer to the wetland boundary.
Right. And could you please address the slope aspects of this current plan?
Oh, the slope aspects, nothing is sloped toward the wetland resources. We're not sloping through, we're not sloping things toward the 50-foot buffer zone. Our major slope is here on the driveway, located completely inside of our work area, in what is actually already disturbed lawn area. When we had that slope discussion before, we were talking about slopes between this retaining wall where my cursor is here, being at a 2 or a 3 to 1, and the driveway going up to the garage. So I think the redesign of the site kind of renders that slope discussion, kind of takes it to a different place here.
Right, thank you. So on the other side of the retaining wall, that you'll get a structural engineer for, what's the slope over there?
The natural slope of the land. In this area here, it's following probably a 4 or 5 to 1%, and then it looks like it's evening out. And I don't have a scale with me, but there's probably 5 or 10% within the buffer zone that won't be disturbed.
so what's the slope on the northwest side of the proposed retaining wall, please?
Northwest in this location here.
Around, or, right, the northwest perimeter of the,
The northwest perimeter, that's probably a 4 or a 5 to 1 slope, so 5 to 1 would be 20%.
okay. So 20%, to look back to page 22, table 2 of the MAC Wetlands Buffer Zone Guidebook, 20% requires an additional buffer multiplier of 1.4 in order for the buffer to do its job.
Okay, but that is a slope that's in an existing lawn area now that we're not going to be disturbing, right? We're not going to be changing that slope. That slope is as it exists now. It's lawn area. It's an existing lawn, grass slope. We're not creating that slope. That slope's already there.
Okay, but how will it be impacted by having the retaining wall built?
The slope won't change. The same contours are just going to run right into the bottom of the retaining wall, and the slope on top of the retaining wall will be directed down toward the gravel area of the driveway. So it won't just sheet over the top of the wall and go that way. It's going to follow my cursor down this way and then go off into the buffer zone. We'll have additional area to be treated and things like that.
Say that again about additional area to be treated?
It'll have a longer flow path, basically. It's not just going to jump the wall and flow right down this slope where you see it here. It's going to ride the wall, come down the driveway, and then when it gets to this area here where the wall ends, it'll be discharged along its natural course to the 50-foot buffer zone, where it'll then be treated through overland flow and vegetation in the 50-foot buffer zone before it goes off to the resource area.
Right, thank you. And so what is your evidence that that amount of treatment, that distance, is enough?
You know, I will say that I haven't prepared exact evidence with forms and figures for this. This is also not subject to stormwater management criteria, being a single-family house. I think that the engineering presumption and the reasonable determination is that this is what is essentially a pervious driveway, that we are maximizing the contact area of overland flow for as much as we possibly can. I would say that based on that, we have met the intent of the stormwater standards to the maximum extent practicable, even though they do not apply to this project.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Any further questions from the commission?
Also,
Any comments from the public? Raise your hand or put something into the Q&A box. Okay, so I'm just trying to go through my list here. So, Jennifer, can I ask a question before we go to close the hearing, or not? Is that there are, so we had agreed that we would likely condition the design of the retaining wall to be presented prior to work as part of the condition. The other thing that was raised as part of this was a cross-section of the driveway design. It seemed to me that the proposed design is sufficient to maintain the pervious nature of the area. So do you think it's reasonable for us to condition that if we were to move forward?
I do. It's we're just talking about a detail that's not it's not that substantial that you would need to wait.
Very good. Okay, so Mr. Diaz, I'll leave it up to you if you want to close the hearing or what you want to do at this point.
yes, sir. I think we'd like to close.
Okay, so Ben, you're recusing yourself, right? So, we're gonna make a motion to close the hearing first, and then we can deliberate some more and then make a decision. So I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
Lundin second,
Roll call vote on closing the hearing. Caulfield's aye.
Lundin aye.
Yeah,
Okay, so motion to close was 3-0. Caulfield's with one being second.
You have one abstention.
I don't think he's abstaining. He's actually recusing himself. So he's not voting at all. So the next issue here is any deliberation on the case, the project. Okay, so we don't have any. So just from my standpoint, I believe it's a reasonable determination to make the disturbance, the cumulative impacts of the disturbance by the wooded area is will not have any adverse effect. So on the wildlife. So that's my own opinion. I believe Carol has a different one. She's happy to. I'll give her the floor to state it if she wants.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Right, we do disagree, and as far as protecting the residents' interest in all of the wetland values, including wildlife and wildlife habitat, I don't believe that the public had in mind killing the wildlife that would be killed when the habitat is removed. That includes slow-moving animals like turtles and frogs and salamanders. Mice probably can't get away from machines, so there will be wildlife killed. So let's not kid ourselves.
But that's not the standard, Carol. It's the population of the animals, not individual of the animals. So I mean, that's not the standard. I mean, that's something that gets raised, and I think it is the population impacted as opposed to individual.
Could you point us to where that is in the regulations or bylaw, please?
I believe that's generally accepted, and I don't have the regulation available to me, but I think that's pretty regularly accepted. So.
Well, I would request that we have a better look at our regulations and see if there is a distinction made.
Okay, so just so you know, if there isn't a distinction made, I can still make that conclusion, right? I don't have to go to the fact that if one field mouse is disturbed by this garage, that it would make it unbuildable, right? I mean, that just doesn't seem reasonable to me.
I'm not talking about one mouse. I'm talking about a part of an ecosystem will be destroyed.
Okay. I agree. That's the standard. I'm saying that's what it is. I don't believe that the system is going to be adversely affected by this. That's my conclusion. I think we're just coming to different conclusions on this.
Right, and my request is that we get evidence as is required.
I believe that there's a reasonableness to make that reasonable determination that it is. I don't think we need to go through some a complicated study to do that. So.
Still, it's the applicant's burden, and so that we can protect the public's interests.
I want to be very clear here. I am protecting, and I've been doing it for many years, the public's interests. That's the only reason I volunteered for this job, was to protect the public's interests. I don't want the implication that somehow because I have a different opinion than you, that I am not protecting the public's interest.
Well, I would say that in this buffer zone guidebook, there's plenty of evidence that 50 feet of a buffer is not adequate to protect wildlife.
Okay, our bylaw has in fact, our bylaw is one of the strongest ones in the state, and we have an inner 50, and sometimes have an inner 25 no disturb zone, and some don't have an outer 50, and some don't have bylaws at all. So, I mean, we have a very strong bylaw, and so to imply that we should have hundreds of feet of buffer zone is, I think, outside the realm of reasonableness. Plus, that's not what the bylaw is. So, you know, from my perspective, I believe we're doing right by the bylaw. We're doing right by the regulations. We're doing right by the public. So,
So I would.
any further discussion?
Right, I would say that we're not here to compare our bylaw to other towns. I think we're here to compare it to science and evidence.
Any other
There's
comments?
evidence that says even 100 feet isn't enough to support wildlife.
Any other comments?
No, thank you.
Mike, any?
Just for an idea, do we have a timeline on when that possibly would be built, time of year? Your garage.
I have to imagine at this point.
Just, I want to be very careful here.
Sorry.
We've closed the hearing.
Oh, just can't ask. Cool. I was just curious.
If you want a condition that it isn't to be built at a certain time or
No.
particularly,
Totally just
we
asking
could
the
do
black
that.
and white.
I that's a very pertinent question. I wish we had asked it before we closed the hearing. Okay, I'm happy to have that kind of conversation, and we can even have it amongst ourselves about if there's a certain time of year where we want to build this. We want it to be built or avoid certain times. Those are things we can discuss, but unfortunately, I can't go to Mr. Diaz now to give the answer to that question.
That's fine.
Okay.
So I'm all set.
No, and perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
A good question. We're about 2 minutes too late. Okay. Seeing no more discussion, I'm going to make a motion to issue a notice of intent and permit for work for 19 Emily Lane, noting that we're going to condition that we will have engineered plans for the retaining wall presented to us prior to construction, and details added to the plan and provided to the agent for the gravel driveway design.
Spade, second.
Roll call vote. Caulfield's aye.
Lundin, nay.
Spading aye.
Okay, so Caulfield's with a Spadius second, 2-1, and the motion passes. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so next up is 26 Scythe Road, which should be yes, George. Is Peter on vacation? George, you're now you're part of the meeting, so you can.
Good evening.
Good evening. So, hi George, how are you?
Good.
Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit? This is a 26 Scythe Road, which is a notice of intent for upgrade of residential single-family septic.
Yes, good evening. My name is George Rollins, registered professional engineer. I'm representing Joyce Bishop for the upgrade of a residential septic system. If possible, would I be able to share my screen here?
Yes, you have that ability.
Let's see, where are we here? This project is located southwest of the intersection of Misty Brook Lane and Kilseth Road. There's an off-site bordering vegetated wetland to the west in this vicinity. This area here, it functions relatively as an isolated wetland, but it does have an outlet. There is an 8-inch SDR 35 pipe that runs underneath the neighbor's driveway, so technically it's not isolated. So we went out and did percolation tests in this area here, and we've sited the leaching field in this particular area. That put us outside the 50-foot buffer zone. We were attempting to keep some vegetation at this corner of of the site. The front yard has the water line that goes through the middle of it. There's an infiltration dry well that with kind of a sophisticated piping system that ties into all the roof drains into it. So we were trying to stay away from that. So we felt like this was a good happy medium. Or outside the 50, maintaining that vegetation at the front. We weren't disturbing any of the existing stormwater management devices. What I have, we've spec'd out erosion control along this area here, and then also we wrap it right around to the front of the property. What I find is a lot of times, especially this time of the year, if work is done this time of the year, that the sites are, there's not going to be any grass growing there until spring if they ended up doing the work during January, February. So quite often I'll spec out erosion control to be there until the grass comes in. We've proposed silt sacks and these two catch basins here. And there's quite a distance to the catch basin down Misty Brook, so what I've actually spec'd out are, I call them straw bale check dams. Basically just put down some filter fabric and set a couple of straw bales in the gutter line, and that just gives it an opportunity to capture any siltation that might be going down the street.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just zooming in a little bit on the
Sure.
this sort of left side?
Oops, wrong way, sorry. I'm sorry, yeah, so
Thank you.
I apologize. So again, these are the straw bale check dams I was mentioning. So we do have a dewatering pit located up in this location. We have conservation markers that basically run along the edge of the existing lawn. And at this point, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Jennifer?
George had already made the plan revision that we had requested, so that part is all set, showing the pipe in the bordering vegetated wetland. During the inspection, I did notice a few brush piles and some leaves in the wetland itself, but the homeowner was there, so we reviewed not to put things in the wetland, and that when we do the pre-construction meeting, we'll look at where those 4 markers would be make the most sense to her. We do that at the pre-construction meeting. George, are they going to come in through the existing path off Misty Brook Lane with the vehicles?
Probably not. I'm thinking they're going to come in right in this area here.
I mean, over the curb, though?
More than likely, yes.
Oh, okay.
That she has not secured a contractor yet.
Okay. So if they do that, we just want to make sure the sediment control can move in that location so the trucks can go in and out instead of them driving over it.
Yeah, I have a note that on the plan that I believe the let's see here if I can find it. Oops. That let's see what are we. Yeah, sedimentation control on the road may be removed during work hours.
Yeah, that was it for me. I don't have any other questions.
So, George, one of the things is you noted here is that this is going into a moderately wooded area, right? I mean, there's probably a little stand of trees there, right?
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 trees in here that are gonna need to be taken up, need to be removed.
And you're trying to retain some of the trees at the front of that. That's one of the things I was a little bit concerned
Yeah.
about. Interestingly enough, one of the trees has a little sort of medallion on it. It's a little small little sign, talks about it being a backyard
Yes.
wildlife habitat or something.
Yeah.
Sort of, it was sort of an interesting. It looked like a school child, sort of inspecting the area with their parents, and I'd like to preserve that as much as possible.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just have all these different things that
Yeah, I
we're
know.
squeezed between, and my client and I would specifically talked about try to maintain some woods up here. We have a gas line here. We have a shed. It's just this, and then
Yes.
it's just sort of a little bit of a balancing act, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that when I was out there and I looked at just from my own perspective, and I went back to the plan and said, okay, why did they choose where this was? And I said, okay, I saw the dry well, I saw the water line, I saw the overhead wires, and I also looked at the existing location of the existing system, which is inside the inner 50. This is one of those things where there is some loss here, but I don't know that there's a better choice here. Other than tearing up the driveway and putting it under the driveway, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense either. So it's just a question. I mean, if you're stating that we're going to lose 3 or 4 trees, and we're going to try and save it, and the homeowner wants to save as many as possible,
Yes, yeah.
I'm a little bit more relieved at that than you're just going to go in and take that whole little area out.
Yes, I mean, again, so there's a batch of trees here that will remain. There'll be a little bit in this area that'll remain, but unfortunately, just due to the aggressive nature of this type of project, unfortunately, something has to give. Yeah, the other issue with this house is that she does have a pretty bad water problem.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to exacerbate that as well. So
yeah, I mean, this part of town is that way. So I mean, this whole neighborhood, you could say that about any of these houses. So
as we all know, a lot of these houses would not be built today.
Yes. But 40 or 50 years ago, they were. Any other comments from the commission? Questions? Any public comment for? Oh, go ahead, Carol.
Sure, thank you. Have we discontinued our use of the simplified septic review that Andrea often brought forth?
No, I believe this is being done under the simplified septic review.
Okay, maybe it's just not getting mentioned. Okay. And then, George, I just have a question for you, not having to do with this particular application, if I may.
Sure.
Just 1 second. Where are we going?
Right. I just wanted to ask. Here's another septic system going in a buffer zone, and I've agreed to try to hold my tongue on this, but
Okay, so I'm gonna rule the question. If you want to stop the question so I can rule it out of order, you can. But I'm not going to go down this road. We're not going to discuss policy in the middle of a hearing related to a situation where it isn't something that we've talked about it. This is a Department of Health issue that we would have to solve with them before we started dealing with applicants that way. So if you want to ask the question, get on the record with it. I'll rule it out of order and we can go on.
okay, thank you. I will do that. Mr. Collins, I wonder about moving towards using nitrogen reducing systems more in the future, because our town has so many of, wet backyards.
So Mr. Collins here, so the question's ruled out of order. Okay, we've had this discussion many times before. We're not gonna discuss policy in the middle of an applicant's hearing. We need to get this hearing done and move on to the others. Jennifer and I have had conversations related to this. The Department of Health, to be quite honest, the Board of Health, to be quite honest, is not in favor of this at all. At all. They have no appetite for it at all. Zero. Less than zero. They're actually against it. So, until we can get beyond that hurdle, it doesn't make sense to have this kind of conversation. So, we can get to a point where we have public hearings and we can bring in experts and talk about it and everything else, maybe, but we have to get through the Board of Health first. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you for that update.
Okay, any public comment for 26 Scythe Road? Okay, I have no further questions, so I'm going to make a motion to close the hearing.
One being second.
Motion to close, roll call vote, Caulfield's aye.
Carol, aye.
One being aye.
Stady aye.
Motion to close, Caulfield's with a motion, Lundin with a second, 4-0. Any further comments, deliberation?
And for me,
Seeing none, make a motion to issue permit for work and order condition for 26 Scythe Road.
Carol, second.
Roll call vote, Caulfield, aye.
Carol, aye.
One being aye.
Stady aye.
Caulfield's with the motion, Carol second, 4-0. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is a continued hearing with 218R Center Street and 95R 100R Washington Street. This is a notice of intent for installation of PFAS treatment buildings. And who should I bring up? Jennifer?
We should have Maria, Adam, Greg Swan if you would like. And it looks like Grace is from EP. I think that's everybody.
Okay, Grace should be coming in right now. Okay, so I don't know who's going to take charge here. You just want to introduce yourself and tell us where you stand on the project.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Swan. I'm Assistant Town Engineer for the Easton Department of Public Works. Hi, Jennifer. I have with me today I have Adam and Maria from EPG. And I'm sorry, I didn't see you down there, Grace. And we're here to continue our hearing for the PFAS treatment plants on Gary Lane and off Washington Street. And at this time, I will turn it over to them. Actually, Jennifer, do you want to jump in here?
Sure, I can. I think at the last meeting, we were just waiting for the stormwater report and for them to appear before the planning board. So we do have the stormwater report from Ty and Bond. It was revised. The updated version does show that the project meets stormwater management standards under Wetland Protection Act. And so I think we have everything we had requested from the last meeting.
And due to some technical difficulties, the planning board meeting was canceled tonight. They couldn't get their Zoom to work. So that'll be rescheduled and we will appear before at that time.
Okay, so
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, hang on a second, Maria. I just want a procedural question I need to ask of Jennifer. does that impact our ability to close this?
I don't believe so. If there were an outstanding issue that would be, might require plan changes, then you might want to hold off, but I don't believe so.
Will we need to condition anything?
You have a draft set of conditions where in your
Yeah,
package.
I'm not specifically related to planning and zoning board. I appreciate there's always conditions, let me tell you. If there's less than 50, we've really done something special, but, so I'm talking about, do we need to condition anything related to the planning and zoning board hearing?
No, because there's already the general condition in there that says if there were any changes to the plan, they would have to bring them back to you. So you don't
Okay.
need to do anything special.
Perfect. Maria, I'm sorry I interrupted you before. Feel free to take the floor here, identify yourself, and carry forward.
No problem. I just wanted to mention that we did submit updated plans showing all of the buffer zones and things that I discussed at this meeting, so you've got the latest and greatest plan set. And fingers crossed, there's no.
Okay. Can somebody just remind me, just 1 second, was there a Mullins needed on this from anybody? Did that get submitted to us? Is everybody here during the first one? Okay, Carol, did you have a Mullins on this, Carol?
It's not ringing a bell with me about having seen this before.
Yeah, so you're not eligible to vote, just to make it clear. I just want to make sure we get this correct. So if we get a vote recorded, we got the right people voting. So we started it at the last meeting, so you were absent. So I just want to make that clear. Anyway, but anything else from environmental partners here? Jennifer, anything else we need to know about this?
I don't think so. Like Maria said, everything that needed to be changed on the plans had been completed.
Right, I know we had some changes and some, I think we changed the ground cover as well in a place and whatnot, so I think given that the stormwater report has been modified and is acceptable, then I think I'm probably okay to move forward with this. Any other questions or comments from the commission before I go to public comment? Okay, so any public comment on 218R Center, 995R and 100R Washington Street? Okay, so seeing none, Greg, do you want to close?
I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing.
I think one of us has to make the motion. That's okay though.
But no, my closure is thank you very much. I don't really have anything else to add. It's pretty self-evident. We'll be tasked by DEP to get this treatment plan in and go from there.
Just as a point of information before we close, what's the timeline, expected timeline on the project?
We expect to have this up, and Maria and Adam, you can jump in here in the next 12 to 18 months due to lead time to different types of materials, construction equipment. Pandemic is not helping.
Yeah,
We're doing to accelerate this, but it's going to be a little while to get everything in place.
okay. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, make a motion to close the hearing, 218R Center Street, 95R 100R Washington Street. Roll call vote to close. Call vote. Aye.
Carl, aye.
Lundin,
Yeah.
Stady, aye.
Okay. So Caulfield's motion, Spadia's second to close, 3-0-1, I guess. I'm never quite sure what to do about it when they're not able to vote. And any other deliberations, comments? Okay, so, seeing, none, make a motion to issue a permit for work and order of conditions for 218 R Center Street, 95 R 100 R Washington Street, and notice of intent for installation of PFAS treatment program. Conditions is noted in the report.
I'll second.
Caulfield's with the motion, Carol with the second. Roll call vote, Caulfield's aye.
Carol, I.
Indeed, I abstain.
Speed, aye.
Okay, thank you all. Appreciate your patience for waiting through, to get to this. Good
Thank
luck
you,
with the
guys.
project too. I'm really looking forward to having it done, so.
Keep an eye on the website. We'll keep updates when it happens.
Excellent, thanks Greg, appreciate your help,
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
thanks. Okay, so, next up is a, certificate of compliance for 19 Rollins Road. Jacob, Josh White is here, so let's bring him up. Hey there, Josh.
Hey guys.
So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit here, or you can just be there and answer our questions, whichever you prefer.
Or can I share the plan?
Sure, just keep it brief.
Yep, I will. Alright, you guys
Trying,
can see
Jennifer.
it. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Josh White from Jacobs Driscoll Engineering, and we prepared this certificate of compliance as-built plan for you. This is for 19 Rollins Road. You can see the wetlands and mean annual high water all around the property. The septic system was installed in the back. It's got the single air treatment tank with the pump chamber and the field right here. The perimeter sediment controls are still in place when we did this survey. I believe they're still in place today. The whole backyard was seeded and loamed, and everything is stabilized around the perimeter, starting at the driveway. I forget how many there were, but there's a bunch of.
Let's just put it this way: there are too many.
Yes, there's a lot. There's a lot of markers with posts with markers on them. Yeah, that's pretty much this one.
Yeah. So, Jennifer.
That's correct. It is stabilized. All the markers are in place, and the homeowner was there when I did the inspection. I did let her know that I would work with them on editing a little bit of those markers so it's a little more visually appealing.
Yeah, I made a similar comment there as well. So, the only other comment I have, and it's just a general comment, not about this project in general. I actually saw it on the states that were for 26 kill sites as well. I want to be a little bit careful about having the markers several feet into lawn when it's at edge of lawn. I think it's a little disruptive. Okay, and so I think while I'm all in favor of the markers themselves, I don't want it to be something that becomes so disruptive that the homeowner feels like they need to remove them. Okay, so I think we sort of have to find this happy medium of where we want them, how close to the. You also don't want them to be someplace where they're overgrown. They'll get overgrown by the brush, but somewhere in between it, because these are many of these are 2-3 feet into the lawn, and they're gonna have to run the mower around them. You know, it's really just gonna be pretty obstructive, to be honest. And I'm glad Jennifer's gonna try and work with the homeowner. So that's my comment there as well. So, any other comments?
No, that's ready for a full certificate.
Okay, so I make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 19 Rollins Road.
What do you say?
Roll call vote. Caulfield's aye.
Carol, I.
Lundin, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Caulfield's with the motion, Spady with the second, 4-0. Okay, you're up again are you up again? No?
For 37 Kaufman.
Okay, why don't we take these out of order? And we'll take 37 Kaufman up next. If you don't mind that. I don't see anybody here for 11 Glen Road, so you're up, Josh.
All right, let me throw this plan up as well. So again, Josh from Jacob Chipko Engineering. So this is for 37 Kaufman Road. We submitted an NOI for our client to do some maintenance in our backyard and remove some vegetation that was overgrown in this area and in this area. And she removed and replaced an old fence that was fallen down and replaced it with new 6-foot vinyl fence and a chain link fence along the back. One of the so this back area is all stabilized. The grass is growing really nice when we were out there doing the survey. The perimeter sediment controls were still in place. I know Jennifer said that once we submitted this, they could be removed. I'm not sure if that's taken place yet. I'm gonna guess not, but there were wetland medallions we installed on the back fence, which were shown on the NOI plan. Those are there. As part of the NOI, we proposed some buffer zone enhancement plantings just because this project was within the 50-foot buffer zone, which is usually a no disturb zone. So we were given permission to do some plantings in there. From what we know, they were, as we stated in our letter, they were planted sometime around April when most of the work was done, and then the fence was installed, I want to say like August sometime. There was a lot of delays on that. So we were kind of out of the loop on that. So we didn't follow up on the number of reports for the plantings in the buffer zone area. So the letter that we submitted from the landscaping company that did the work, that was the only one that we received, and it stated that the number of plantings was there. So at the time, it appeared to be in compliance. So that's why we submitted this plan for the full COC. But I'll let Jennifer speak. I know she had a couple concerns after her site visit, so I just wanted to make sure we've got everything addressed.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think you have everything addressed that you could address. So the little bit of compost that was there that has been removed, I followed up site inspection last week. So that is gone. The as-built plan has been revised to say as-built, so that's all set too. Like Joshua said, the intermediate restoration reports were not submitted, but the final report says that they were planted. There's at least 7 out of 10 of them that are still growing. So that meets your standard that was in the conditions. The no disturbance zones I did see on the left-hand side, but I didn't see the 2 on the right. They are small, so I may have missed them though.
The medallion?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were talking about the medallions or you're talking about the ones that were there for the contractor, not to go too further.
Yeah, just the little medallions.
Yeah, so I think my own comment in seeing those is you have to even know what you're looking at to see what they are. And so I know that we've come up with a new medallion that would have been much more visible in this case, and it would have made sense what they are. So it's unfortunate because I really don't think they're going to have the effect that they were meant to have. But they are according to the conditions that we gave to them to do. So I think we should probably be a little bit more careful and say exactly what we want them to say and big and everything else if we're putting them on fences. And if we're okay with using the medallions that we created ourselves, then we go with it. If we want something different, we've had times where we've told them we want 4x4 square signs or whatever. So I'm just as a comment from myself. So any other comments from the? I'm okay. Everything was as expected on the site. It looked good, and I did go into the woods myself and see that it didn't look to me like there was a lot of material still out there, if there was some before. So I do appreciate that. Any other comments from the commission, please? I'm going to make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 37 Kaufman Road.
I'll second.
Roll call vote. Caulfield's aye.
Carol, I.
Lundin, aye.
Maybe I.
Caulfield's with the motion. Carol second, 4-0. Okay, thanks, Josh.
Okay, thank you guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. Oh, well, you voted to close. Did you vote to issue?
I voted to issue certificate.
Thank you.
11 Glen Road. This certificate. This is a partial certificate request.
They requested you to continue to the next meeting.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yep. So you just take no action on that. You don't need a vote.
Good enough. That's a good choice.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up is 1 Scotch Dam Road. This is an emergency certificate that was requested. I'll bring Mike Toohill up in case we have any questions. So Jennifer, I don't know if you or Mike want to describe what the situation is. I'll leave it up to you to tell me.
Yeah, Mike's here.
Hi,
Hi, Mike.
good evening.
Good evening.
I'm
You
not
want to
here
give us
for-
the synopsis?
Yeah, just give us a brief, introduce yourself first for the record, and then
Sure.
give us a brief synopsis of what occurred.
Mike Toohill from Conoco Engineers and Scientists, and we're here for Mass Electric. During that October 26th, 27th storm event, there were a lot of trees that came down on poles, and a number of transformers were knocked down. We had hundreds of them. And these transformers, for the most part, contain a fluid, and in this case, it is a mineral oil dielectric fluid. So the old PCB containing transformers, there still are a few out there. We did find a few, but this was not one of them. So this was a mineral oil transformer. The transformer came down with the pole, and it broke, and it released about 4 to 5 gallons of MODF. There was a catch basin nearby, and obviously some of it got into the catch basin. We were notified about this event, our emergency response team, on October 31st, I think it was. And they went out, and Clean Harbors went out, cleaned the catch basin, using materials, cleaning materials, and then a back truck to get the material out, traced the outfall down towards the pond, and there was no sheen noted down at the pond, but they deployed booms, oil absorbent booms down at the pond, and they put booms also in the catch basin. Came back a couple weeks later and checked it. They found no more sheen, so they took some samples, some water samples from down at the pond, which I have in the last letter that I sent out. I have the analysis, and it came out pretty clean. It's a catch basin, so there are some hits of aliphatics from the pavement, but it's way below MCP standards, so it's not the dielectric fluid that's down there. There was no notable sheen then either, so they've removed the booms. My folks went out again on December 1st just to retrace everything. We didn't see any evidence of the spill at either the catch basin or down in the pond. So I had filed for the emergency certification before we had the lab samples back, so we didn't know for sure if we were going to need additional actions, and that was why we filed for emergency certification in case we need to take additional actions. But at this point, there don't seem to be any additional actions warranted in this location.
So do you no longer need an emergency certificate, or you need it to cover the stuff that's already been done?
I would go ahead and issue it because there was a release to a catch basin that went to a resource area. We'll probably go back out again in another week. We were out there December 1st. We'll probably go out there again, 2-week schedule. Go out and just take a look again and make sure nothing has moved through the pipe because they cleaned the catch basin real well. They vacuum sucked it, and we didn't see anything 2 weeks afterwards in the pond. But get a few good storms and you might see something. So we're going to go out and take a look again.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jennifer?
Nope, that's it for me.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, so you need a motion from us to approve the emergency certificate?
Correct.
So I make a motion to approve the emergency certificate for 1 Scotch Dam Road. Roll call vote, Caulfield's aye.
Carol, I.
Lundin, aye.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that was a motion by Caulfield. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Motion by Caulfield, second by Spady at 4-0. Okay, so the next up on the agenda is a discussion about proposed wetland regulation revisions.
Our official hearing, woo! So the proposal is to add another category so that people who are replacing their failed septic systems can file with a fee of $150 instead of $525. The other portions that we were proposing require a bylaw change, so we'll have to have a discussion about that another night.
Same.
So just trying to, is there any comment from the commission before I go to public comment on this? Okay, we're we're either very tired or we're all in such unanimous agreement about this.
Let's go with unanimous agreement.
Thank you. Okay, so any public comment for the revision change, reducing the fee for septic system repair from $525 to $150? Seeing none, I make a motion to close the hearing.
Carol, second.
Roll call vote, Caulfield's aye.
Carol, I.
Lundin, aye.
Yeah.
So at this point, we voted our next meeting to make the regulation change?
I think you can vote it now.
I make a motion to change the regulation in section 50324, filing fees for septic system repair or replacement for $150.
Carol, second.
Roll call vote, Caulfield's aye.
Carol, I.
Lundin, aye.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was both the close and the revision. Caulfield's with the motion, Carol for the second. 4-0, both votes. Okay, next up is Conservation Commission 2022 schedule.
Do you have a copy in your packet? That's it.
Yeah, it's on page 46. Do you want me to put it up on the screen?
No.
Does anybody want me to put it up on the screen? Does anybody have questions about the commission? Is there a specific birthday we have to avoid, anniversaries? Last year we had a hearing on my birthdays, or we had a meeting on my birthdays.
You're a sport.
Yeah. I didn't miss much. I didn't see any conflicts or any issues that I had.
Those dates are all still Mondays, right? For the most part, a couple on holidays.
Correct.
Yes. Is there?
No Tuesday.
One Tuesday?
No Tuesday.
No Tuesdays. Good.
Yeah, everything, I mean, we avoid Labor Day, July 4th, those are always problematic ones, we always move them, so I'm glad we avoided them this time. And still the intent is to stick with Zoom until we're not sticking with Zoom, so.
You have a public hearing on my birthday, but I'll just make you guys sing to me.
Oh, I will. You will not be happy, but I will. Okay, so, make a motion to accept the meeting schedule as included in our packet.
Lundin, second.
Roll call vote, Caulfield's aye.
ROI.
Lundin, aye.
ADI.
Caulfield's with the motion, Lundin with the second, 4-0. There's a discussion about the MACC dues, fiscal year 23, there's a small increase, so a couple percent this year. There was some question about whether or not we utilize the MACC resources to their full benefit. I think it costs us about $100 each or $125 each or somewhere in that neighborhood to be members every year. I know that I utilize it myself, and probably not as much in the last year as I did in the previous several, but I do utilize it, find it to be a great resource. So. Anybody else have any concerns about us being members of the MACC?
It's an amazing resource.
Okay. You need anything from us, Jennifer?
Nope.
Any commentary on your side? Okay. Meeting minutes from November 15th. The only change that I had was in the first paragraph, it says that the meeting came to order at 6:30 p.m. I mean, 7:15 p.m. when it actually came to order at 6:30. The one that came to order at 7:15 was the month before, it was October 18th or something like that. So that just needs to get updated to 6:30. Any other comments, corrections, distinctions, modifications?
Super minor on the Mill Street minutes. Now I have to find it.
Yep.
Sorry.
You decide to pick the biggest, the longest one.
I can't find it. There was a name with too many N's in it on the Mill Street one.
Oh, yeah.
Tennyson, Mr. Tennyson, spelled with two N's in one place and one N in another. Just
Okay, well, I'm going to pass on that.
yeah, that's fine.
I think we know which who he is. So. But thank
Yeah.
you. That would definitely be. And first of all, I don't even know which one's right. I have to look it up. Okay, so anything else? Make a motion to accept the minutes with the change on page 1 of the start time of the minutes for November 15th.
Maybe second.
Caulfield, roll call vote. Caulfield's aye.
ROI.
Lundin, abstain.
Spady, aye.
Okay, so Caulfield's with the motion. Spady a second. The vote was 3-0-1. Okay, so next up is a report from the Wayfinding group representative, and I'm going to bring a document up here that I just want to show where we are on this. We are probably one meeting away from actually coming to a decision on what this is. We actually had 2 meetings since our last our last meeting. So we've met twice already, and we had one before that. And so I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what we said. Making sure I've got the right concept here. So you should be able to see. So I'm going to go down to a page that has all of them together, and then I can sort of go back. So the ones we've decided on making it to the next section is this number 1 and this number 3. So we've decided on this sort of arch. They're going to modify the arch to not be these little, tiny little marks. It's probably going to be half as many marks. That's to represent the sort of Richardson arches and around the architecture around town. Shovels, they took away the circle around the compass to make it less busy. But we seem to like this one here or this one here. There's a, whether or not to keep this, we make it a version of this in blue with the band at the bottom versus orange. So it seems to be between these two as far as shapes of the signs are concerned, as well as colors and whatnot. I think there's going to be one that may, yeah, it's going to be this blue. So, so I mean, that's really where we stand on this. I think probably at some point when we restart the sign project, replacing some of the signs on some of the conservation properties, we'll probably find some place to put this logo so we can sort of make the consistency. I think we've got 8 or 10 that we replaced a few years ago that we don't have on there. But you know, we have the bird with the tree on there. I don't know if it's a bird tree with a little bit of pond in the back. I don't know. It's like that. I think that's it. Any questions? I can give you, so this is sort of the sense of what the signs look like in sort of a family of signs. This is sort of a welcome sign. This is a big roadway sign. This is a little bit smaller directional sign. And these are some other signs, just to give you some sense of, there'll be 4 or 5 different types of signs. Any questions?
Came a long way since last meeting.
Yeah. And we actually have a meeting next week on it. So we met on this last Thursday. We have another meeting. I think it's this Thursday coming up. Not this week, next week. And I don't know, maybe this week.
I do like the orange.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing about the orange that is a little bit, you can see it in this sign here, is that I think the printing's a little small there, and at night I think you'll get overwhelmed what that actually says by the darkness of it. But it could be different with reflective. You know, this is all reflective paint. You know, so at night it would all light up. So so that's really what it is. So, but we have come along with this. A lot of times put into this, and the consultant has really listened well and come back with options that the group can really look forward to. And this is actually a large group. There's like 10 or 11 people that are part of it. So you can imagine trying to get to any sort of consensus is actually, but they've actually done a good job because we've been able to narrow it down, and finally get down to a couple of things and give them a couple little feedbacks, and they'll come back. They'll probably come back. We gave them 2. They'll probably come back with 3 or 4 variations of those 2. But we're the type of group that seems that everybody's getting a little bit of what they want. So it seems to work well. That's it for me.
Thanks for doing that.
No, thank you. The CPC committee representative.
Right, that's me. There's nothing I can report from the executive session last time.
Is there anything proposed on the public side that has any conservation impact?
I don't believe so.
Should there be? Should we be? You know, I mean, we really don't have a lot. I mean, we have big projects.
She can't tell us.
What's that?
She can't tell us.
No. I'm talking about from our standpoint. You know, should we start thinking about, you know, next year's application process if there's some project that we need to get done? You know, we've got a project here that I hesitate to go back for more money when we need to get bids on the one we've got money for. So that's the only concern I have.
Right. What about?
I'm sorry. What do we have for open projects that require CPA funds? Is it just the Red Mill Road, the barn?
The barn.
The barn.
Yeah, and then I don't think anything else has CPA funds associated with it. I think the Sam Wright Field is all state funds.
What about the, must be gonna have a hot flash, the forestry report that we had done?
Yeah.
What are the actions in there?
You have a forestry report?
Yeah. We paid for a forest report. Actually, there was a grant that allowed us to pay for the forest report. I think we only put in a few $1,000 and we got the full forestry report.
Oh, you mean the management plan?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that came in. It's like this thick.
Yeah,
I know. I think we had a presentation on the summary of it. So,
we did.
Oh, okay.
so
Right.
but it really is, as Carol says, well, what are we doing with it? Like, if we started, and I know you're just wrapping your hands around some of these things. I think the question should be, maybe we could take a little look at it and see if there's part of that project that maybe we can implement over the next things. I mean, some of this was that we felt like we might be able to offset some of the cost of doing some of it with some of the price of getting wood out of there. I think there's some good things in there. We need to thin out some of those woods to get multi-layer in our forest. So I think those are things that we should probably think about. So Carol, I appreciate you bringing it up. And yes, Jennifer, put it on that list.
So I take it there's an annual deadline to apply for CPA funds for our projects?
Yes.
Excuse my ignorance on
It
this.
it has to get to CPA by a certain time, and then they vote on what they might recommend to go to town meeting in the spring. So typically, it's around this time of year that you need to start thinking about that process. I think the application process started probably right about now.
Thank you.
Jennifer, environmental planner updates.
We received 6 bids for Sam Wright Field today. We had the bid opening at 2 o'clock. It looks like 3 of them were unresponsive, so we really only have 3 bids. And they're being sent to town council just to verify before we can announce an actual award. But the apparent low bidder looks like T Ford at $288,000, which we don't have.
I was going to say, and how much do we have?
We have 140,000. So I had broken it up into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. So hoping that we would be able to get one of them done. But I still have to go through the procedure with town council and make sure we select the low bidder first and then go to their phase 1 and see how much that is. But we at least got some bids.
I'm very pleased to hear that we got those, and I'm not surprised that they're higher than expected given the construction environment these days.
There was one thought to try to take all of the fill and see if there was a place on town property where we could make a sledding hill where they had enough parking, but I couldn't think of a place, and not many others had a good idea with adequate parking that wouldn't be too close to somebody's house. But if you think of something, let me know, because that would be really fun.
Yeah,
Really cool.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw this out there. There's a place on Foundry Street that has numerous soil piles. Are they looking for any more soil?
I am getting rid of soil. That's the point. We need to put it somewhere, and that would reduce our $288,000 price.
Yeah, I think she's suggesting maybe they'll take the bill.
Oh yeah, I think they're on your next agenda. You can ask them.
I think there was one other thing that I had forgotten. I think I wrote a note, and now I can't find it. So we'll have to think about it. Any other comments from anybody? Questions?
Yeah, I have one thing. In addition to going back to the forestry report, we want to have a quick look at what was in the master plan for mandates for us. There were quite a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, I just I don't know, Jennifer, have you had time to review the master plan?
No.
Okay, so when you do get to that part of, usually you probably won't get to it until you do your annual review, which is probably coming up in May or April. So I think when that time comes, we should definitely discuss it. I think we probably have bypassed a lot of that last couple of years, given all that's been going on. But I think that it's a good idea to see what's in that and figure out where we go from there.
Okay.
Anything else?
Move to close.
Oh my goodness. Caulfield's second. Roll call vote. Caulfield's aye.
ROI.
Lundin, aye.
KDI.
4-0. Lundin with the motion. Caulfield with the second. Okay, thank you all.
Night.
Yes.